Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us for this seventh installment of Talking VoIP with Datagate, where we go on a learning journey of subjects related to VoIP and UCaaS from the perspective of MSPs and wholesale telecom providers. In today's episode, our guest is entrepreneur, president and co-founder of ConnectBooster, Ryan Goodman, who's based in Fargo, North Dakota, and is very well known and respected in the MSP industry, not only for the popularity of ConnectBooster, the favorite payment solution for MSPs, but also his podcast, Confessions of an IT Business Owner, which you can find on connectbooster.com. Ryan, welcome, and thank you for joining us here today.
Well, I appreciate you guys inviting me and having me on as a guest. This is great.
Excellent, thank you. So Ryan, I'll just cut straight to the chase. What was it that inspired you to create ConnectBooster, and how did ConnectBooster come to be?
Well, that's a great question. It was actually really born out of our own business pain that we had. So to go back, to roll back several years, I don't want to completely age myself, but I've been in the electronic payments industry for a long time. And that was at first selling feet on the street, standalone credit card terminals to small businesses, in our community here in the state of North Dakota, and then ever expanding. And as we were working through, growing our business, we realized that the larger accounts ran point of sale. You think of like a bar restaurant, the touchscreen systems that manage inventory controls and timekeeping management, all of that. And so it was hard to get in and get the payments for those type of deals without having a relationship with the point of sale provider. And so what we had done ultimately, long story short, is we had bought a point of sale provider in 2010 to be in that game and to not only gain those large accounts, but also provide that service and be able to get into new accounts that way. And we were not used to running a business that dealt with any type of accounts receivable. See, the payments business is pure recurring revenue, a margin made on a spread, and we were always paid automatically. So when we got into our first service-based business, trust me, that was a real taste of like, well, people don't pay their invoices on time, and and we had no idea how to run a service-based business, right? We're always oftentimes more ambitious than smart, and we said, okay. We ran a PSA tool to help us streamline and organize that business, and we said, well, there's got to be some electronic payments gateways and tools and recurring billing engines that integrate with our accounting package and integrate with the PSA tool we were using, and there wasn't. And so we said, well, we are going to crash and burn if we keep, going beyond $50, $75, $80,000 of accounts receivable, and said we're gonna build a tool that integrates to start making this business very similar to predictable recurring revenue, similar to what we were used to in growing. So that's the birth of a product. We had some real pain inside of our organization and didn't know any better. Didn't know that getting paid late was the standard, and we decided to develop around that solution.
Wow, and I think that's something we see a lot, that the great software is often made out of your own journey and your own requirements and what you learn along the way, and so that's really interesting to know that's how ConnectBooster came to be. And so how are things progress now? What sort of trends are you seeing now in payment collection? What are the general drivers that you're working with to help your MSP clients?
Yeah, so I'd say the trends that we're seeing, and I've always felt like in our business we were bucking a trend on businesses, especially in the U.S. and Canada, for example, getting paid by check, and that being one of the normal business to business forms of payment, right? And I always felt like we were pushing and kind of bucking a trend to say, well, hey, you should be offering online payment and driving towards EFT, ACH, not only for the security of the payment data, but control over the payments process and the ability to get into, recurring type payment for those type of bills that are appropriate for that. And more than ever, especially through COVID, we've seen a necessity to drive that change. There were situations where people had cash quarantined. Not only were they quarantined, but that you run into a situation where the end client sends in a check to pay for the bills. They did this from their house. The money's sitting in a mailbox. There's no one at the office. The MSP's not paid. The client feels like they have paid. It's not their fault. The check isn't cash. So now what are you doing with this cash flow issue, right? And it's like the need for electronic payments really ratcheted up specifically because of that. But, you take a step back and also look at the behaviors around consumer behavior too.
Yeah.
One-click buy from Amazon. How many people are ordering their groceries more than ever and going for pickup or having them delivered? You have all of these consumer behaviors that are also driving expectations inside of the business world. And so we're seeing more and more where the end small business is not just asking to remove some of the friction in the getting paid process. They're actually starting to have some expectation around unthrottled access to a billing and past history and all of that. So, and that's just flat out good for service-based businesses to then implement solutions to help deliver, because ultimately that ends up crushing accounts receivable and helping in cash flow, which we all know businesses. I mean, cash flow is like, if we're taking a business and boiling it down to like you and I as humans, that's the blood in your veins. That cash flow is blood in your veins, and if it's not there for a period of time, things get real bad short, right? So that's good for business.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned setting expectations. What advice would you give to businesses, and in particular MSPs, about setting payment expectations with their customers?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first, there's a couple of different scenarios. I'm going to explain the first one because this one you have immediate control of, and that's setting expectations in the sales process. That's the first best way. Second best way is setting expectations in an onboarding process. The place where you don't want to be, and trust me, I've got some advice for you on it, is setting payment expectations after you have done work and you're not getting paid, or bought product and now you're getting late paid on, you being a collection agency, you being the bank in that scenario of product, sitting on the shelf and not being paid, or even worse, installing said hardware and not being paid. Now it's in the client's possession. That's where you don't want to be setting expectations. That's the bad side. But I think understanding the fact that you will have a money conversation with every single client. What position are you going to put yourself in when you need to have that money conversation? Yeah. And I'm saying money conversation, that's not bad or uncomfortable. That is talking about what working together looks like. That's, you've already negotiated price on product or service going forward, or what project work looks like. Now we're talking about SLAs, what implementation looks like, what does service look like going forward? What do the net terms on these bills look like, and what are the systems and processes that we have in place to honor our net terms, but this is how we get paid, and this is the process of your onboarding on how we enter payment information and what comes out automatically, and what is online for approval, and what we do if it goes past due. Setting all those proper expectations like everything else. And if you can do it and change your behavior in the sales process, you're never going to be at a point where someone is leaning forward more and just engaging with you on what the next phase in your business relationship looks like.
Yeah, indeed. And so Ryan, you mentioned there, people not paying the bills on time. What advice would you have for MSPs to handle tough customers that don't pay on time? What do you advise there?
I think a lot of it, it can be one broad statement I would like to make is that you shouldn't be afraid of that difficult conversation or what appears to be a difficult conversation. Many times it's not as difficult as what you think it is. People are just worried about having those money conversations and approaching it in an empathetic way. I mean, if you're going to call someone up and say, hey, I'm going to shut off XYZ if you don't pay, you've already failed before you've started.
Yeah.
If you can come in and do what I like to call an accusation audit, where it's like, hey, I'm about to have a tough conversation, and I feel uncomfortable having it, but at the end of the day, you and I both know that we have businesses to run, and then lay out your case on what's going on because of these late payments in the business, and ask them what's going on inside of their business. People want to engage in a conversation. And I've also found that a lot of times most people do want to pay on time, and those are the good clients. And if you're finding someone that's consistently not paying you on time, and almost I wouldn't call it malicious, but they're slow playing for reasons like, this is our policy. Here's another piece of advice on how to deal with those slow paying customers. Getting to the point where you have 80% of your revenue being collected automatically, now you can start deciding if those true slow pay policy type clients, do they actually fit in your ideal client list? Are they an ideal client? Are they a client that you'd say, would I get 10 more? Would I onboard 10 more of them if I could? Or am I looking for a different profile? And do I need to have a really difficult conversation about what offboard might look like if behavior doesn't change? You as a business are typically never going to have that conversation unless you're doing the right expectation setting as you're onboarding new clients and getting that cash flow coming in, and about an 80% of your monthly recurring revenue coming in on a monthly recurring basis without human contact. You need to hit that benchmark, and then you can start making real business decisions and cleaning up those that might not be the ideal client. But I find a lot of times people are just flat out afraid of the conversation, and so they're not having it. And then when they do, they're having it wrong, versus working on a conversation filled with empathy and working to understand the other's point of view. Which, by the way, doesn't mean you have to agree with it. Having empathy doesn't mean you have to agree with their point of view. You just have to show that you understand their point of view to find a reference point where you can work from. If you approach it like that, you'd be amazed how well you can move the needle once you get well and listen and work through to understand, to make progress, versus trying to push your collection initiative on the first call.
Yes, excellent. Yeah. In fact, Ryan, you mentioned billing regularity, recurring billing, which we all love. What are you seeing in terms of the frequency of billing? Monthly versus weekly versus other. What do you see, and what do you recommend? And what's happening in the industry this way?
I mean, we're big fans for monthly recurring revenue, just because of predictability, right? I know a lot of MSPs and service providers, telcos, will bill twice a month. Sometimes once for the recurring piece, which follows the same methodology. You're recurring coming in once a month, and then maybe project work or anything that would be hardware related that falls outside of the recurring, maybe being on an interval different than the recurring. But I think the monthly predictable cash flow is a big plus in helping you just be able to intelligently scale your growth, right? Versus going out and having annual. You also get to address breakage on a much tighter time frame, or any churn, versus being surprised by some annual contract that might come through. So that's definitely been my experience, and would be my recommendation all the way. Right.
Yes. So what about when the recurring billing is variable? So it may be a different amount, maybe based on usage. How do you handle that, and what's any thoughts on that subject?
Well, it's a challenge, right? I mean, it can be a challenge. Now, what we've seen are, the PSA tools. I mean, tools like Datagate that are coming into the market. Tools that are aggregating variable billing around, Microsoft licensing, all of that. There's a lot of tools that are coming into place to help deal with the billing aspect, which is good. What happens then is sometimes there's an issue with a disconnect on the payment side, right? And so then dealing with a recurring bill that has a different variable dollar amount in traditional recurring payment tools in the market are very, very static, right? Like, Mark, I could bill you $100 a month on the 5th of the month, and there's 100 tools out there that will do that very, very well. But now the bill's gone up to $105 or down to $95, and the billing systems are great at manipulating that bill, but there's a disconnect with, I just told the payment system to bill you $100 on the 5th of the month until I told you to do something different. And that's the key thing. Now we have this other manual process to make sure the automatic payments engine is actually matching up to the other automatic billing engine. And if there's a disconnect there, you have another layer of manual work, and so tightening up. And I guess from a ConnectBooster standpoint, I'll say it, we take a step back and look at from the billing type and billing level, and not just the dollar amount and date, and say, hey, if we have a bill type that's recurring, why are we caring about the dollar amount? The accounting system or the billing system can tell us. We just know to pay this type of an invoice when we see it due. And so that's where there's a little, that's where actually, I'm not going to say a little, that's where there's a huge differentiation to create automation with tools like Datagate and ConnectBooster and your PSA tool to truly automatically aggregate the billing, present it to the customer, knowing that the payment can come in automatically and there's no human intervention or manipulation in that process.
Absolutely, yeah, and we've seen that the integration between Datagate and ConnectBooster has been incredibly popular, and I think that's a big reason for it, particularly in telecom where we do have often a usage-based.
Absolutely,
it's been great. So, what do you have any advice for MSPs around inflation? How's inflation affecting the general collection side of things, and with price increases and that sort of thing? What are you seeing there, Ryan?
Yeah, that's a good question. Admittedly a tough question. I'm not an economist, but if I boil it down into its simplest form, right? We understand that dollars from 3 years ago, whatever your currency 3 years ago is typically, on average, over time, not going to be worth the same as what it is today. $1,000 3 years ago does not have the same buying power as it would today, right? And there is a lot of talk about inflation in our world, at this moment, and prices, just different than what we've seen over the past decade. It's starting to ratchet up. Is that going to be long term? I don't know. That's where I'm not an economist here, but I know that you can use these types of headlines to your advantage when you're having conversations with clients around billing. If people are coming up on contract renewal, you injecting we all know that, there's rapid inflation going on, and I've, you and I both have to, my conversation is not just to have a conversation with you about 5%. Like, what are you doing to have a 5% bump in your end sales to your end clients, right? Again, there's that empathy piece, coming into play around that conversation. But, now is a great time to have those conversations around price increases due to inflation. And where I like to use price increase conversations, this is going to tie back to one of your other questions. How do you deal with difficult paying customers?
Yes.
Is to use that as a lever to get them on recurring billing.
Yes.
Oftentimes, that 5% bump is not as valuable as if you had the cash that was due even at today's rate just coming in on a recurring automated basis, so you don't have to invest any time in getting paid after you've done the work, right? And so if someone gets on board, for example, using that lever, we have contract renewal, I'm going to increase by 5%, but get on board with your bill for recurring, and it'll only go up by 3%. You get a 2% discount. Well, now if you're running a credit card, you've automatically covered the cost of a credit card. So you've got recurring revenue at a net no, new work going forward. And if they get on board, let's say with EFT or ACH, hey, I'll waive this for 12 months and you're not going to see an increase, and we'll defer the next 36-month contract, the price increase for 12 months, and maybe you can work in then after 12 months an incremental bump. So you're still getting it, but you're using that as a lever to drive the automation of your collections process, and so what does inflation mean for all of us? Tough to say. I would use it as a tool, especially since it's in the headlines, to button up your process today. It's relevant, and you can essentially give discounts for for getting that behavior moving the direction that you want to see it going.
Wow, yeah, that's excellent. Well, thank you, Ryan. So in terms of, there's some great advice you've been giving us here today, and I'm certainly learning a lot from this. And I'm just wondering, in terms of the ConnectBooster product itself, can I ask, what sort of things have you put into the ConnectBooster product? How does ConnectBooster work to really follow some of these principles that you're talking about today? And you know, tell us a bit about the ConnectBooster take on this.
Yeah, no, great question. And I think, it's actually giving the ability to implement the visibility and the 24/7 access that we had talked about. Again, in the age of the Amazon one-click buying, being able to order groceries and have them delivered or picked up. There's just this reduction of friction in the buying process. Yes. Going on everywhere, and it's also happening in the SMB space, ratcheted up more in larger businesses. I mean, even think of like working with your mortgage companies or insurance companies, large organizations that are giving 24/7, 365 access to information to allow you to manage your payment methods, to pay how you would prefer, but it's just the unthrottled access. Yes. And, we are designed to do that for the small to medium-sized business owner, in this space, and it's working, and people are having success with it. Integrations to the tools that they're using inside of their business, whether that's the PSA tools, business line tools like the accounting packages, that we're all using. That's where we're going in and helping you execute against these ideas and these methodologies of making sure your accounts receivable is in check. You can do all of it without tools if you want, but it's the burden of labor and the lack of scalability in your business is where it all ends up falling short. And so that's where, tools like ours are coming in and saying, hey, here are the ideals, here are the standards that you should be at, here's best of breed. And oh, by the way, here's a tool that's going to make it very, very simple for you to execute against those policies. And then the automation, right? Like you guys, from the aggregation, the billing automation, everything that you're doing there, and the complex world of telco billing, to being able to automate the payments and be able to drive down automation and matching payments to invoices inside of an accounting package. All of that outside of automation is time that needs to be spent. And this very cliche, but time is money, and that's the reality of it. And so, the automation is a huge driver in really, really broadening the bottom line of your business on an annual basis, especially if you're growing and scaling. I mean, that'll eat you alive without automation. So
definitely. And Ryan, I noticed today you're wearing a Rev shirt.
Yeah.
And, I thought it'd be good to maybe talk a little bit about that, the Rev program. Sure. I think it's a brilliant program that you're running, and please tell us some more about it.
So what we had done, throughout the years, we've always had clients that have asked. I had one of my end users ask, what are you using for this billing portal? I like interacting with it. And our partners would contact us and say, well, hey, I think I could sell this. I'm getting some interest from my user base. At that point, we were not, the technology wasn't ready for that type of engagement, outside of the MSP. And so we had enough of that feedback where we said, okay, we need to answer the call, I guess, so to speak. And it's great because in this partner program that we call Rev, it's a triple win. There's a win for the end client of the MSP that wants the same type of billing and payment automation that they've seen their MSP use. And so we provide that value to the end user through the MSP. The MSP is getting recurring revenue off of working with us in that capacity, right? Monthly recurring. And then obviously there's growth, on our side. So, I mean, anytime that you can align all parties and get that triple win, it's been a lot of fun to work through that process. And as we've grown and expanded, there's a bunch of fintech. I had mentioned earlier at the beginning of the podcast that we've been in the electronic payments game a long time. Well, there's a lot of fintech out there in the world, and every one of the MSPs clients needs to get paid somehow. A lot of them are being paid via e-commerce or mobile, and oftentimes they have fractured tools to accomplish 3-4 different ways. Well, we're electronic payments experts, so even if it's not a ConnectBooster engagement with the MSP's end client, we're introducing this different fintech that can help consolidate multiple tools. So we're branching out, not just ConnectBooster as a pure play, anything related to payments, and helping partners solve PCI compliance issues and data storage and access issues when it comes to storing and transmitting electronic payments, and solving a lot of problems there. So it's been a really good relationship with our partners. And again, everyone in that scenario wins. So that's a really fun project to work through, not only for us, but through our MSP partners as we continue to uncover opportunities with them.
Right, excellent. So, Brian, it's really interesting to hear your journey, your story, how ConnectBoosters, how it got started and how it's evolved, and how you worked into the Rev program. So now, what about the future? What do you think? What do you see coming in the future of collections? And where is this all heading, do you think?
Well, I think I talked about this a little bit earlier, and we see a distinct shift where I felt like for a while businesses were like clawing and working really hard to drive some of these concepts through their client base and get the buy-in. And some of the shift I've seen, again, specifically through what we've seen inside of COVID, and then just the consumer and large business interactions of removing the friction, we're actually starting to see a shift where the end client is actually expecting it. They're actually expecting a frictionless process versus you emailed me an invoice and now I have to send you a check. Can't we just make this easier? Which is really weird to me where the market's gone, because I always felt like we were having that, like, okay, guys, here's the strategy to get people on board. More so now, people that are not offering that type of a solution and frictionless access and frictionless onboarding and really frictionless accounts payable for the other side of the equation. They're like, you guys are technology companies. Why is this so hard? It's just, again, driven by that consumer behavior as well. There's never a better time to you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The tool stack is sitting here, and I'm not saying just me. I mean, there are others that can help, assist you in that process. I just, we have the integrations with the ecosystem to make it that much easier, and just be aware that sometimes in that process, as you're trying to automate, there are areas that you haven't thought about that create another layer of manual labor. And I would encourage you at minimum to have a discovery call with our respective teams to show you where those pitfalls are. And we certainly have a lot of happy partners that are in process and have removed that friction and have added this type of automation to their business. And we're always willing to share and get you in front of those individuals. We're supposed to make it sound good, Mark. That's our job. I mean, talk to the end partners, talk to the clients, and that's a great place for you to get your information to and do the research on tools like us.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. That's actually sort of, I guess, brings to quite a logical conclusion of a very interesting conversation. And thank you, Ryan. This has been great. I really, really appreciate you joining us today.
A pleasure.
And so I'd like to thank you. And I'd like to say also to all our listeners here, if you have any questions for us, our contact details are here on the screen, and we'll be very, very happy to answer. And so thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Ryan. And everybody, may the VoIP be with you. We look forward to talking again soon. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you.
That's great.
Bye.